The Great Smoky Mountains provide the perfect classroom for researchers and students alike. Every year, it is used for recreation of all types by thousands of tourists, naturalists, scientists, and people native to the area. Here, we see the living space of 11 biology students as they immerse themselves in wilderness for a 10-day-long class, headed by Neil Sabine. The campsite is located in the former town of Cosby, Tennessee.
Well, Cosby was originally a town, and that was probably typical of the Allegheny kind of towns. They grew a lot of the food that they ate. Probably didn't have very much access to imports, so so that was the beginning of Cosby. And then during Prohibition, they became very famous for bootlegging. The reason for that is, as you know, that area is full of uneven terrain where you could hide a still relatively easily, relatively close, and be difficult to follow through the woods, especially if you knew your way around. So they were known, I think, at one time as the moonshine capital. Then, eventually, as you well know too, they were bought out. The people were bought out, and the town of Cosby is pretty much gone now, and it's into second growth forest.
At the beginning of each day, the students would hike a trail, and the instructor would allow the students practice at map reading, GPS navigation, trailhead notation, and compass observation. Once completed, they began their journey along the way, discovering new facts of nature.
So you're going downhill, right? Level step.
Well, we're starting out lower. We're going up.
I gotta go to Mark.
Oh, we'll be going back.
Now just, there you go. And there you're at. Where the elevation we're at, 2236.
So I'd rather start down there.
We're right off the road. Okay. Yep. You know what that is?
No idea.
The flower of a tulip poplar. Come here and look, gang. Good call. Hardly ever see those on the ground. And that is the flower. Looks like a tulip, doesn't it? Especially it's come down a little bit. Usually these are up more, right? Yeah. They're starting to see they're curling down. They normally would curl up. It really does look like a tulip. Yeah. But these tulip poplars go huge high, and you can see them down where they're sitting too. Where they're right, the other group's sitting. Mm-hmm. There's a couple big ones down there too. And look behind us.
Yep.
Right? They're not small trees.
The students kept a sharp eye for the animal life of the area and learned much about habitat structures of the Smokies.
You know what it is? Take a look.
Emerald ash borer?
No. Oh. It's an ant mimic. Look at it. Look at its head. Doesn't it look like an ant?
Yeah, it does. It's a little too big for an ant.
But it's got an ant head.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So what's it do?
I don't know. I don't know what it does. What do you think? Your idea is just as good as mine.
Does what an ant
Neither of us know. Right? So we can make up a story.
Once upon a time,
yeah,
when the great buzzard flew.
Well, all you know is it's a mimic.
I chuckled on
and for whatever reason, it looks like an ant. Now, what would be the advantage of looking like an ant? Most ants you can't eat, they got formic acid in them.
Yeah.
Right? So they're not, most birds and things won't eat ants. There are a couple of specialized birds that are called ant birds that'll eat them.
So that
in the tropics.
That one wouldn't have formic acid in it.
No, it's not an ant.
But it looks like one.
Because since it looks like one, things won't choose to eat it.
But what?
Yeah, right, because they know better than to eat ants.
Right.
Right? This is jewelweed. This is the opposite of stinging nettle.
That's good for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it hasn't flowered yet, but this is jewelweed. I don't see any nettle, but that's jewelweed. Right spot for it. like real moist areas.
So is that the syrup and everything with the actual flour then?
No, you heat.
It's not a melting fat. Nice. That's why I help you to heat it right.
Yeah. It's kind of like aloe. When you use aloe, you break it off. And butterfly, it's about ready to go. See it? It's going to be a butterfly probably in a day. See it? You can see the wings. See them?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought that was a petal.
No. Go ahead and look close. It's a pupa. See? It's encased. Like in plastic. It's going to take a day or so and it's going to be a butterfly. Almost there. You can see the wings, right? Can you see the wings folded in there? Yeah.
The Great Smoky Mountains have the highest number of lungless salamanders in the world.
Oh, that's one of the red cheek ones.
Salamander.
Is it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is. But that year, right there. That's
It's the red cheek
The
salamander.
little guy?
the Georgia red cheek. Or Georgia red cheek.
Oh. Yeah.
He's jumping one.
There it goes.
Look how fast those guys are.
Well, it's just not salamanders. It's a particular kind of salamander. It's the lungless salamander. And the reason it's so important for them in the Smokies is that there are more species of lungless salamanders in the Smokies than in the rest of the world. So that's called an ecological hotspot. The reason for that number is probably twofold. First, evolution over time, that the salamanders have been there a long time. They developed there and speciated there. Secondly, the diversity of habitat available in the change in elevations and the change of temperatures and humidities, the number of waterways, ephemeral and permanent. All those things have helped salamanders, which really can't get completely on land because they don't have the kind of skin that doesn't dry out. So I think those are probably the big reasons for that. And it isn't just salamanders, right? Salamanders are what's well known, but there's a number of songbirds that use that during migration as probably the biggest continuous area of woods between here and Canada. So I'm sure it's important to a lot more things than just salamanders. I think salamanders are what made it famous, right? But the diversity of habitats support a lot of animals.
Along with the plant life and animal life, the students saw beautiful scenes along the trails and unbelievable sights at their destinations. One such trail, called Madden Bald Trail, led the students to a rare open patch located on the peak of a mountain. This allowed for a breathtaking view of the natural landscape, which was unseeable from beneath the canopy.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. What balds are just what they imply. They're areas at relatively high altitude that are free of trees. Nobody really knows where the balds came from. We know that Europeans use those to bring their livestock up there during the summer months for pasture. and they probably maintained the balds in that way, but they didn't create them. There is some evidence that maybe American Indians cleared areas of land to improve hunting, and but that's still kind of iffy. The other theory is they're geological. There's something about the soil that promotes the growth of the grasses over the growth of woody vegetation. But that doesn't seem to hold much water because some of the balds are getting smaller and with the encroaching vegetation around them. So it really is a mystery. But balds are really just grasslands at elevations where you wouldn't expect to find them. And so there are open areas. Usually balds give you a pretty good view of, as you know, and under the canopy you can't see very far. But in the balds you really do get some tremendous vistas.
The Great Smoky Mountains are a national treasure. They offer seclusion from busy societies, a home base for campers and hikers, a learning environment for students, and a laboratory for researchers. This space, which is loved by so many, however, is in grave danger and needs protecting.
What that means is that the original stand of trees were logged or cleared for, like the town of Cosby, for example. Many of the small communities had to clear land to grow their crops. And so second growth means that after the original, what we call virgin timber, the timber that was there, it wasn't really virgin. It was the timber that was there when we discovered it. And those trees were valuable in the sense that they had a lot of clear board feet. What that means is it's a long way to the first branch on some of those trees. It might be 50, 60 feet up in the air before the first branch comes off. So you can imagine that pure log underneath there with a diameter somewhere around 3 feet. That lumber is very valuable, and that's what happened to the Smokies. It was pretty much cut out. So that means all the big trees were removed, which were the virgin timber. And what that means, it was the timber that had the longest to grow. Certainly there were fires and those kind of things. Lightning strikes caused fire before even humans were there. But the idea was some of those trees were very old. And when those were cut down, now the trees are relatively young. So that a second growth forest, you usually can tell, is that by the size of the trees, they're much smaller. And when they're smaller, then the actual trees are denser because they haven't got big enough to outcompete the trees around them. So second growth is important because it's the forest healing itself, but the magnitude of time that it takes for a forest to heal itself, especially in the Smokies, is probably at least hundreds, if not thousands, of years.
In the past, we as a society have clear-cut the forest and damaged the environment of the Smokies. In the present, we are polluting it to a dangerous level.
You know, that's really hard to say what diversity is lost. Well, certainly the diversity that we were talking about earlier of habitat types. So you can imagine a forest that would have relatively large trees, relatively small trees, small clearings. So to have a diversity of habitat types. And when you clear that, you're down to one habitat type. Usually it was cleared for either settlement, which means that you're really changing the landscape for the organisms that were originally there, or you cultivated it. And once again, that open area was atypical of that part of the country. So, but probably then, those areas that were cultivated relatively small, probably families maintained and that crop by hand through that year. So that probably wasn't that big of a change. But, you know, as the Smokies became popular, more and more people came, and I think that's probably been the most damaging. I think the Smokies are the most visited national park in the country, and the roads and all those kind of things fragmented the habitat. It made it more difficult for organisms that were originally there to have that kind of continuous habitat that they need. Many, like a bear, for example, they need a huge area of forest just for one bear. And when you put a road in, right, that's kind of breaking that habitat up. It's huge. Smog, mostly. See, what happens is that the Smokies are relatively high. So when, let's say, motor exhaust, or even coal-burning power plants, that smoke goes in the atmosphere, but not that high. And so what happens when it hits the Smokies, it blocks that. And so what happens is that the Smokies is a natural barrier, so it builds up. It actually has more smog sometimes in New York City. And that has a tremendous impact on vegetation. Because one of the aspects of that high levels of pollutants is acid rain and other pollutants into those relatively fragile streams. And so they can poison organisms with that combination of the smog and precipitation. As you know, it rains a lot in Smokies. And when that gets into the groundwater or gets on the ground into the streams, it can change the pH or the acidity of the water, causing many organisms to either die particularly when they're young, like larval fish and those kind of things, or it can kill insects, which many birds and other animals rely on.